My name is Cindy Stowe. I'd like to welcome each of you to today's session on EIS Use Case Reviews, the approaches for Fair Opportunity Solicitation training course. This session will be recorded, so we ask, even though you may be muted, sometimes it goes unmuted, please mute your phones and your computers. And we do have the ability to be able to do Q&A in the pod quadrant that's on the screen. We will allow time for open discussion throughout the presentation. The presentation slides can be downloaded on the far right quadrant, and a link to the recording will be distributed following today's session. The session questions will be and answers will be captured as well and be provided after today's session. We really do solicit your feedback and ideas for future needs, questions, or any of the topics that you'd like to have presented. So a survey will be provided at the end of today's session. And if you cannot access the URL, let our EIS TCC team, you'll see the email address there. You can just send a request. Our disclaimer is that basically the guidance on solicitation best practices are based on past solicitations and the procedures contained in the Federal Acquisition FAR. Today's agenda is about the course. I don't know what that, sorry about that. We'll have objectives, we'll have use cases, both on background issues and suggested approach. Use case topics will include single fair opportunity solicitation, multiple task orders, and diversity with single and multiple contractors. And then we'll have the questions as well. In response to the agency's communicated transition challenges, opportunities, or problems, GSA has prepared the use cases that you're going to hear today on the examples. Each case includes a background that describes the scenario. Issue provides the challenges. Suggested approach will be an example to address the issue, and then we'll have the links for helpful resources. Use cases will be published in Appendix B. They're in the process of approval right now of the Fair Opportunity and Ordering Guide, also known as the FOOG. They'll be available on the EIS Transition website as well. And today's training will focus on 3 published use cases. The objective is to provide information and assisting agencies in preparing their solicitations designed to specifically address awarding a task order with multiple contractors, award diverse, redundant backup services as a part of a single solicitation to a single provider, and award diverse, redundant backup services for a single solicitation with multiple EIS contractors. There are subject matter experts. We have Bill Lewis with us today. We also have Roger Hoover, who's going to be our primary speaker. He's with the Office of Contracting for Telecommunications. We have Bill Kinter, who is with the TCC, along with Jim Soltis. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Roger, and he'll start our session today.
Excuse me. Thanks, Cindy. Okay, so the first use case has to do with issuing a single solicitation but anticipating multiple task orders. And I need to stress that all of this information is guidance or suggestions. We are not here to be prescriptive and to tell agencies how to write their solicitations, but we think we have some helpful information that we've gathered in response to questions that have come in and concerns. So keep that in mind, please. So for a little background on this one, some agencies may want to award, for example, data and voice to the same contractor, but may want flexibility to award data and voice to one contractor and maybe as an option to separate contractors. Next slide, please. So the question is, how can agencies best write their solicitations to have that flexibility in their solicitation documents? So again, the example is an agency that may desire to include all their data and voice services into one solicitation as opposed to multiple solicitations to streamline the fair opportunity process to one acquisition that includes all the requirements but may result in multiple task orders. Next slide. So we think it's important that agencies who want this kind of flexibility in their solicitations include language that makes it very clear that the flexibility exists to award to multiple contractors and to award multiple task orders as opposed to just one task order to one supplier. Also, it's very important, of course, to clearly define the requirements and make it clear which requirements may be awarded to each contractor. Hopefully this will result in task orders that clearly specify which requirements apply to each awardee. And as we would always advise, we suggest that this kind of solicitation language be run through your legal department for their advice. Next slide. So we're going to go through some of the solicitation or RFP sections. We're using the uniform contract format A through M just for convenience. It's not required that solicitations use the UCF, but just for clarity, we're going to look at a few of the sections that we think you might want to put this specific language. And of course, this would be in addition to all the normal language you would need to have in your solicitation. We're just going to excuse me. We're just going to focus on the language that we think is germane to these use cases. So Section B, which is your pricing section, should include a clear description of the agency's intent to separate data and voice pricing, again, based on this example. And then hopefully this will facilitate separate evaluations of each capability. So if the intent is to award separate task orders, then if you start out in Section B with clear language, that should facilitate the separate evaluation of your data proposals and your voice proposals. Section C, the requirements, again, should include a clear description not only of the requirements but the agency's intent to keep the service areas separate so that they can be awarded separately. And it's also important that Section B and Section C, for example, the language in Section B and C remain in sync, and you don't have any conflict between those two sections in particular. Next slide. Another section would be Section J for your attachments. It's important to have separate artifacts, your pricing templates, and documents like this for data and voice to maintain their independence, again with the to facilitate the evaluation of those service areas separately. And the other pricing submission documents should include all your locations, all the quantities for all required and optional services, as well as the other attachments related to the technical requirements that you will have in Section J. Section L, instructions. Very important to have clear instructions to the offerers, again in sync with what you have in B and C. This is where you're of course instructing your offerers how to prepare their proposals so they can be evaluated in accordance with the agency's plan. Next slide. And then last but not least, Section M, the evaluation criteria, of course, is very important. And in addition to everything else that you need to have in Section M, all of your evaluation factors, your criteria, how your source selection, intent. Section M should describe how the agency will evaluate and award each requirement. Section L, you instruct them how to submit their proposal, how to construct the proposal. Section M, you have to tell them how it's going to be evaluated. And again, stress that multiple awards could result. And it's very important to tell the offerers how the total evaluated price is going to be constructed during the evaluation process, what's included in the total evaluated price, and how it will be calculated for each potential task order. And of course, all ordering contracting officers should, as they surely do already, consult your agency regulations, your FAR supplements, and the FAR itself. Next slide.
I'm going to open it up for questions at this point.
Maybe somebody do a test sound.
A question I have, this is Paul Ahern from the RB. Question I have is when are we going to get into some scenarios later in this discussion? Because so far we're getting, good kind of course instruction at a basic level on the principles. They're good principles, but, so I thought this was based on some lessons learned. So we're going to get into that later on?
So the case study that's written on this, it has, specific language that is provided as potential guidance for these. So in this overview, this was more of a high-level overview of what it is. But if you have a particular case or instance, now is the time you can share that and we can discuss it.
I was under the impression that this was based on some other inputs that had come in so that we could learn lessons that others have already experienced, whether in their early stages of EIS or which is, I'm assuming, the case rather than from networks experience. So I'm just trying to, or is your intent to point out some basics and then have a discussion? Anybody can contribute to the discussion. Or do you already have some case studies that are built that we're going to see? Because we haven't seen anything but high-level instruction, as you said, right now.
Yeah, so there's going to be some additional use cases after this that get into situations for diversity or redundancy where you could have multiple winners or awardees under a single acquisition. So
those might help to stimulate the discussion is all I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. This is Robert with the CFTC. So would this also apply to services such as like mobility, wireless, if we're trying to somewhat segment that out from voice and data?
Yeah, I mean, basically the principles that Roger laid out can be applied to almost anything that, across the service spectrum of EIS.
Okay.
So yeah, you can apply these principles. The main point to get across is, I think Roger used the word flexibility, several times there in the first few slides. In order to have the flexibility to make awards based on what you see in proposals, you need to make sure you kind of segment things out and make sure that they tick and tie between the different solicitation sections so that you retain that flexibility. You can still go in and award everything to one contractor if you want, but you want to have that flexibility to possibly break them out depending on what the contractors come back in their offers.
I think it's a good way to lower your transaction cost of running the solicitation once. Adding wireless services makes a whole lot of sense because that's an easier or clearer segmentation. We have not seen a whole lot of solicitations being planned for wireless services on EIS, but you're going to get to the main suppliers, obviously, through EIS for wireless services. So this is about lowering your transaction costs because the transaction with the solicitation with the government just ends up being high.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason we're looking at it is, FSSI, although it was extended, does have limitations on our awards that were already done. So that's the only reason we're looking at adding it to this, to make it easy.
We encourage that, and that makes a whole lot of sense because you'll be able to leverage a lot more buying power potentially, and it's also a natural segmentation if you wanted to make two task orders from the same solicitation.
The other thing is mobility is a good example where you don't necessarily even have to have multiple services and break out the services in one solicitation or an acquisition. You could take mobility itself and break it up geographically and say, I want to potentially award certain areas of the country to different providers. And that could be another way to view one solicitation, multiple task orders.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, not hearing any, we'll go into the next use case. So these use cases came about because we've received feedback through multiple channels of different areas where agencies have questions. How can I structure something? Again, like I said before, to have the flexibility to get the best deal for what I need provided to me. So the next ones we're going to talk about are solicitations that would include diversity or redundant backup services from a single contractor, and then we'll talk about kind of a sister use case to do the same thing from multiple contractors. So if you want to go to the next one, please. So the background on this, we get questions, can this be accomplished? Can you leverage diverse paths from a single EIS contractor? Well, certainly you can, but what are the best ways to pull that off? So the EIS contract has, all kinds of services that will support disaster recovery and continuity of operations. So what we want to do is break these up into diversity and then redundancy and backup. Let me go to the next one. So the services under EIS that are the best candidates for diversity, redundancy, or backup, pretty much all the data services are candidates here. VPNS, your Ethernet, your optical wavelength, private line, SONET, dark fiber, and your internet. And these are the most prevalent services that are used, for COOP type requirements. Voice service can be done. It is not used a whole lot, but I know in my own personal case, just the other day when my IP voice service was having a little problem, I pulled out my mobile phone and that was the backup. Contact center services are quite often used in diversity or backup scenarios. Wireless services, cloud services, you can use satellite for that. And obviously, and we'll talk about this more in the next few minutes, access arrangements. So to the point earlier, what can you apply these things to when you're looking to go forward with what Roger was talking about, where you want to do one solicitation, but you want to do multiple or have the flexibility to do multiple task orders. This shows all the different ways you could do this just in the area of diversity and redundancy. So if you go to the next one, please. So it's a good idea to define what we're talking about. And as I actually researched this and went out and looked, I found that diversity does actually stand alone from redundancy and backup. All those three terms are often used interchangeably. But what I found was that redundancy and backup pretty much overlap with each other, so I grouped those two together. So for diversity, you're looking at a method for improving reliability by using two or more communication channels with different characteristics. So some of the examples that agencies need this for are access diversity, and a specific example there would be if you're looking for dual entrance facilities. Now, you might have a critical site that has a north entrance and a south entrance, and you want to make sure those are both utilized to your greatest advantage. Another area is equipment diversity. You may be looking for diverse hubs and routers. And then as you move back into your provider's network, transport diversity, where you're really looking for alternative transmission paths through your provider's network core. So that's kind of how we lay out diversity. When you're talking about redundancy or backup, it's more a system designed in which a component is duplicated. So if it fails, there will be another component to deliver the functionality. So whereas back in diversity, in my example of a north and a south entrance, you're likely to be sending traffic every day down both of those paths all the time. Redundancy and backup, though, you're really looking for if something fails hard on you, is there another component to pick that up? So the examples there are really, hot standby, where you're using redundancy where the primary and the secondary are running simultaneously. Another one is warm standby, where the secondary system kind of runs in the background, but you'll have data mirrored at regular intervals, and oftentimes this is a little cheaper for you. And then the last one would be cold standby. Now, in my experience, I usually equate cold standby with an extended outage, because oftentimes when you go to call on your cold standby, it's not working for you. So, it is a secondary system called upon when the primary fails. But I'm always really nervous about cold standby, because I like something that's running all the time, so you know that when you need it, it'll be running for you. Does anybody have any questions about these definitions?
Hey, Bill, it's Carolyn. My only question is, I assume that diversity is usually considered cold standby as well, then?
No, diversity is usually, most agencies that I've or use diversity, but it's really normally in a hot, they're running traffic down both paths all the time. Now, sometimes, you may be having different bandwidth capabilities, so you'll have a primary path with a lot greater bandwidth capability than your diverse path. But oftentimes nowadays with, mission critical things going over these networks all the time, you usually have them full capacity, in your primary and your secondary.
Carolyn, the one thought I had is on your question is maybe with a satellite backup or a satellite diverse access, it could be sitting there in the background more as a warm solution versus a hot, but
yeah,
not really being used for load balancing, but available. Okay.
right.
Yeah, but like Jim said, it's always nice to make it at least warm that you're always sending some kind of traffic over that path, just to make sure it's always there for you.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I'll go to the next one. So the issue here, agencies require diverse, redundant, or backup service as part of a solicitation. And you're looking for a single EIS contractor to do this. So the example that we're going to talk about, because we said, there's many ways you can do this with all kinds of services, but the example we're going to use going forward in this use case from a solicitation standpoint will be diverse access paths from a single EIS contractor. Go to the next one. So with this, I'll turn it back over to Roger, and he can walk you through the different sections.
Thanks, Bill. So back to our solicitation using the UCF, which I think I stated before is not required, but probably suggested. In Section B for pricing, once again, I think it's critical to include instructions that will specify what you want, what you intend to be priced separately for diversity purposes. And it probably would be a good idea here to define what you mean by diversity, so that it's very clear to the offerers, and also how special construction pricing for access arrangements can or cannot be applied. Next slide. For Section C, again, you want to define your technical requirements. So if you're including primary and secondary services, those are listed separately so they can be priced separately. And you want to include the mandatory level of diversity that you need, and also make clear the desired options beyond that which is mandatory. For example, fully diverse with X feet of separation, collapsed infrastructure, and circuits using the same path. Next. And if construction is required to meet requirements, keep in mind that contractors will need time to research and price all of this on a site-specific basis. So you'll need to allow them sufficient time during the proposal preparation phase, so they can do what they need to do to price everything. Better to spend a little more time here than to have issues later on. Also, it's important to include the necessary level of detail. You may need to have street-level diagrams, and all of your requirements need to be described in a way that will solicit a response that defines and commits the contractor to its own process to maintaining that diversity and the supporting documentation. Next slide.
Hey, Roger, let me add a little
Sure.
little color to the third bullet there. If you'll go back. So that item of include necessary level of detail that you need. You know, my father used to tell me that as long as you hold the money, you have the power still. So, you know, once you're, you know, you've made your award, and then you go back to a provider and say, hey, I would like all this kind of detail and everything, as an agency, you've lost a lot of leverage. Street level drawings are often just thrown out there. An agency needs to really figure out, you know, do you need this? There are some agencies that absolutely do. In my experience, I have worked with agencies that after you make the installations, they actually go out in the street and they weld the manhole covers on. So, you know, they would need to know exactly what path circuits are taking. Other agencies may not need this, and street level drawings are often considered very, very proprietary and security sensitive data with, you know, the contractors that we have on EIS. So you want to make it very, very clear up front in your solicitation, you know, here's what I need, here's what I need this. And I think we're going to have something a little later about, well, actually it's in the next bullet there, about maintaining that supporting documentation. If you need that, you need to make sure you put something in there, and it needs to be reasonable. It's like, you know, you're probably not going to get it updated monthly, but, you know, maybe quarterly there needs to be a check. Is that documentation still valid? So want to definitely give people, get agencies to be thinking about, you know, what are these kind of things that I need, and put them in up front while you have the leverage. Question. So are we putting the site visit as mandatory? Are we going to make it a specific date and time to hold the site visit for all interested to attend?
So in the case when you're putting out the solicitation, you're providing the vendors your location. If it's a metropolitan area, there's a very good chance that they would know enough or be able to make some phone calls and find out if there's any need for special construction to meet your diversity requirements. And so given the time you want to get proposals back in and award this thing, I think requiring a site visit would not be necessary. I think in other cases, if you're trying to get diversity out to a rural site, they probably don't have much information and would need to do a site visit. So I think the price that they would give you before they do so would have to be caveated on their part to say pricing's not final until a site visit has been performed. And you have to take sort of a risk management approach to that when you get the proposals in. But it's something I think you have to just ascertain site by site, you know, when you're asking for diversity.
In either case, is it mandatory?
It's not mandatory to require a site visit. If you require a site visit, then you won't get a price until they've done the site visit. So,
Yeah, build that into your timeline to make sure you can do that.
Doesn't sound like it's right.
for the purposes of trying to get this task awarded, if you have a need to move forward, it would potentially delay it significantly.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to add one other thing on the Section B requirements. In Section B of the EIS contract, in Section B29, which is the access section, there's a set of 4 CLINs or 4 sets of CLINs identified that give you some templates of what the vendors could give you in terms of diversity. They have what's called physical concentration location diversity and POP diversity. And you can ask the vendors, I want, diversity all the way to the top through the central office from my diverse entrance, or you could just say, I only want it at the vendor's POP, which is the, where it enters their core network. So just look at that. It's table B2917 if you want to look at some examples of CLINs to use.
I think it's just a comment.
So there's another question, comment. It says, get approval from contractor who did the street level drawing that it can be released in a solicitation. What we're saying here actually is that you are requiring the vendor to sign up and agree to provide you street level drawings in their proposal, not that it would be released in your solicitation to the other contractors.
Right.
In this situation.
Response.
It's in their proposal, their response to your RFP.
Or that they commit, once it's installed, that within 60 days, say, of the service being accepted, they will provide the accurate street level drawings, which is probably the most prevalent way that's handled.
Right, and to make sure that they maintain it for the rest of the contract.
Yep. Any other questions on that part? Okay, Roger, we'll go back to you.
Okay, so we really just sort of talked about most of the ideas on this slide having to do with writing your solicitation in such a way that the contractors will maintain the level of diversity that is required, given that contractors regularly groom their network services for efficiency. There's a risk there that unless you require that your diversity is maintained, you may that diversity may be weakened over time. So this could be done with requirements that the contractor update the drawings, as we talked about a few minutes ago, on a regular basis, and maintain other documents for diversity. Next slide. And of course, in section L, we've been talking about requiring things like diagrams. It's important to include in your instructions that same information, along with other things such as instructions for individual case basis, access arrangements, require the contractors to augment descriptions with all relevant information regarding diversity avoidance, etc. And again, directing them to provide and maintain diagrams and maps, etc. In section M, again, clearly state whether a single task order or multiple task orders may be awarded. Next slide.
Okay, so with this, we can open it up for questions, see if there's any other questions about diversity, redundancy, backup services from a single contractor. One other thing I will share that came out in our discussion when we were preparing for this section is, and it's a lead into the next part where we're going to talk about, dealing with multiple contractors. But there is an agency who has actually employed a somewhat clever approach that kind of bridges the gap between the two scenarios, and that's where they award to a single contractor, but they require them to go out and get another contractor, and this was actually done under networks, and I don't know if they'll do it again under EIS, but you certainly could. So you could go out and require them to work with another EIS contractor to provide the diversity or the backup services. And then you've got, one contractor to deal with. You kind of outsource the problem of the coordination to your supplier, and you let them deal with the other one, and they have to make sure that they maintain your diversity for you. So that's another, I think, somewhat clever way to go after diversity and redundancy, but you only have to deal with a single contractor. Okay, don't see any questions, so we'll move into the last scenario we were going to discuss. And that's same thing, diversity or redundancy or backup services from multiple contractors. So this is the one that gets tricky because you start to get into kind of a chicken and egg type scenario. What comes first? Or oftentimes it'll be you're trying to explain what you want from a contractor, but their question back will be diverse from what? So what we want to talk about here is, some of the ways you may tackle this if you're looking to do a single solicitation and you want to, again, get these services from multiple contractors. Obviously, the easier way to do it is do it in 2 steps. You can do, 2 fair opportunities. You can do one to your primary, award it, nail down what your services are, and then you can do another one, for the diversity or backup services. And, that is the more clear-cut way to go forward, but we wanted to talk a little bit about if you want to do it in one fell swoop. So if you go to the next one. So, the background is, how do you do this with multiple contractors? And, can EIS support this? Well, yes, definitely, certainly it can. Next one. So the issue here is awarding diverse, redundant, or backup services as part of a single solicitation to multiple contractors, where you consider using a single solicitation, but you want to request primary and secondary solutions from your offerers, okay? The one good reason to do this all at once is it does drive more competition, plus, like I said before, while you've got the control, while you've got the leverage, this is where you can assure that you get commitments for cooperation out of your suppliers. So you want to look at a primary awardee that would implement, your primary path or your primary solution, and then you would again go with a secondary awardee for the backup. You want to go to the next slide? So I'll turn it over now to Roger to walk you again through the sections.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, as Bill mentioned, there are a lot of similarities between the second and third use cases, and some or most of the solicitation suggestions are the same or similar. In this case, this is the same suggestion that we made on the second one. Make sure your pricing instructions are clear and complete regarding diversity, so services can be priced individually, and again, specify how special construction pricing can or cannot be applied. Next. For Section C, again, very similar. to what we talked about before, defining your technical requirements so that primary and secondary services can be listed separately and described in detail if you're going to award separate task orders to different contractors. Include the mandatory level of diversity. Again, express desired options beyond what is mandatory. And the last bullet here is unique to this use case because we're assuming that multiple contractors are going to receive task order awards from the solicitation. So we suggest that there be some language in Section C to solicit a commitment to contractor cooperation. And we have here provided some sample language that could be used. The contractor shall coordinate with the other task order contractor to ensure each circuit being installed is diverse from all others or designed in a manner approved by the agency. Just some suggested language that could be used. Next slide. And again, we already talked about special construction. So the same guidance applies here as well. Time will be needed for the offers to research and develop the pricing necessary for that. Level of detail, again, in what they need to put in their proposals, and describing the requirements in a way that will solicit a good response that meets the requirements. Next slide. And again, regarding diversity, just some things to keep in mind about grooming of network services and diversity. Next slide.
Well, just on this slide, just real quick. So in this case, the grooming can affect the other providers' diversity. So if the primary guy grooms it and all of a sudden now they're crossing paths, he has to communicate that over to the other provider to make sure that they stay diverse from each other.
Yeah, so just to make it clear, like I said, sometimes you have the chicken and the egg scenario, what comes first. So what we're really talking about here in your Section C requirements, you're looking to reach out to the EIS contractor community and get them to bid both a primary and a secondary path into your critical sites. Then you have it structured as Roger was talking about in the first case where it's segmented out, so you have the flexibility to say, okay, I can see how each one is doing both. Here's the one that I want to pick for primary, and I can see where this other one, the paths that they put in, I can pick from their primary, and I can build my diversity out of what they've put in here for me. So you end up kind of doing a pick and choose. Obviously, the fewer number of sites you have, the easier this is to do. If you're looking to do this for 3 critical data centers or something, this method works pretty well. If you're looking to do it for 60 sites, it gets extremely more complex, and therefore you may just want to say, I need to do this in 2 rounds. I may need to do it, establish my primary and then go after my secondaries in another round where I can tell them, here's what you have to be diverse from. But what we wanted to do here today is, not give you, here's the way to do it, but to set some seeds in place to start the discussion. So these are the kind of things you may want to sit down with your TOA people who are helping with solicitations and talk through, hey, what are my different options? I heard some of these things in the training. and what are my different options, what will work best for me. So when you're looking at these Section C things, think about this is a scenario where you would get everybody to bid multiple things, a primary and a backup, and then you're looking to try to pick and choose. Okay?
Bill, it's Carolyn again. Do you have any thoughts on the security aspect of if you're doing the two-phase, releasing the primary routing to allow people to bid on the secondary routing in terms of, are you compromising agency security or vendor security issues and how you could address that?
Well, so one of the things you would do if you're doing that, like I said, you need to be very clear up front. Let's just say you're going to do it in 2 rounds and you're going to do the primary first. You have to make sure, you let the primary know, we intend to do a second round for the secondary, and that's where I talked about, the cooperation. You need to make it clear right up front while you have the leverage that they will need to supply documentation to you that you will need to supply to other potential offerers. Now, keeping it within EIS, and I will defer to some other better expert here than me, but there should be non-disclosure and ways to make sure that that information is protected.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it out on FedBizOps.
Yeah.
That was our concern.
So Bill and Roger, this is Bob. Several times the secondary network, it's been referred to as being EIS, an EIS carrier, as a sub to the prime carrier. Why could not the EIS prime carrier for the main network subcontract out to a Time Warner or a Windstream or, for that matter, any CLEC?
Well, and they can, and that is really pretty much the use case that we just did, where you're awarding to a single EIS contractor, but you're making them, come back and show you how they're going to be diverse. And then they reach out to their, and I will call them access suppliers, and they build a solution for you that way. So yeah, they absolutely, they can do what you just suggested.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought I heard you say, another EIS supplier. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that was just I guess an approach that one agency took, and they did it under networks, where they went out and established, an award, and then they said, now you go out and get another networks provider, and you provide the backup, but you in essence turn them into your supplier.
Yeah, and in the commercial world, we see AT&T and Verizon playing that game every day.
Just the benefit to that is that if you get another EIS provider, they've already signed up to all the SLAs and T's and C's, so it would be easier on the prime to be able to enforce those on the secondary, whereas if you bring in somebody from the outside, there's a lot more negotiating they will have to do, et cetera.
Yeah, the flow downs are a lot easier if they're all part of the EIS family there. Absolutely.
The thought I had on that, and I like that idea of using EIS and requesting that the EIS contractor, a single contractor, get diversity from whether it be a subcontractor from somewhere else or another EIS contractor. In the case where your EIS contractor, that's a prime contractor, and they're using another EIS contractor as a vendor to them, a subcontractor, the agency, though, has privity of contract with only the awardee for that task order, even though the other contractor may be an EIS contractor, right, and we still have a contract with them. The agency's task order and that privity of contract for the OCO is just with that prime awardee, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you have any issues with the subcontractor's performance, you still go through, your OCO still goes through that prime EIS awardee.
Yep, the one you awarded your task order to. Yep.
Well, and that raises a second question, which is the pricing, because the primary awardee may be an EIS vendor, but they aren't eligible to use the EIS contract. So what pricing are they getting from that other company to pass through to you?
Whatever they negotiate.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fact that they're an EIS, the fact that they're an EIS vendor doesn't establish pricing.
No,
Okay.
no. In essence, they just become a supplier to whoever you award your task order to.
But you're going to use overall EIS contract prices as your fair and reasonable determination. So the prime awardee's pricing has to be fair and reasonable, so they're going to need fair and reasonable prices from their subs.
Right.
Yep. So it's just one possible approach you might consider.
And don't let them get away with any kind of pass-through pricing nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. The pass-through, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's not even permitted in the EIS, correct?
So my question was, if you do the primary for your first procurement, and then you go out the second time, do you preclude or can you preclude the primary from bidding on it?
Repeat the question.
I've seen solicitations where the government has said you can only win one of these two.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I am not a contracting officer to claim that that is true for EIS, so I will defer to any CO in the room or on the call.
Well, and if you're doing it for diversity, the same contractor that won the first one would have to meet the requirement for diversity.
Right.
But sometimes they want contractor diversity.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because you may be concerned that
Their network.
they're going out of business or something, or being bought by a foreign entity or whatever.
Right.
So those are the different options that are out there. But although what I would say to the question would be, and Jim, maybe you have some past history on this. If you are looking to say, if you're the primary, you cannot be the secondary. You want to make sure that would be in your original
Correct.
solicitation.
I think Micah's question is the one where you do a two-step process. You do one solicitation, you award your primary, now you know what it is, then you do another solicitation for all your backup. In
Right.
that second one, can you exclude the winner of the primary?
Well, and the thing that I'm pretty sure I've seen in the past is in that first solicitation, there would be reference to the fact that we're looking to do a two-part process. There will be another solicitation coming for, the backup services, and in that one you would say the awardee of the primary, is precluded from bidding on the secondary. And if it's all laid out up front like that, then usually you don't get any backlash from that. Okay. Back to Roger.
Okay, so for Section L instructions, in addition to what we had on the last use case, in this scenario, since we are contemplating different contractors, multiple awardees, the Section L instructions should state that the agency will provide the primary awardee solution under non-disclosure to the secondary awardee. It touches on some of the things we were just talking about. Also, again, provide instructions for ICB access arrangements and direct contractors to provide diagrams, maps addressing the route diversity. And once again, in Section M, in addition to everything else, you should state, again, that whether a single task order or multiple task orders may be awarded per contractor. So there could be multiple task orders per contractor. You could have one solicitation and 4 task orders, some of those going to the same contractor.
Well, and as Jim stated earlier, that is a situation where you may want to think about it geographically, because depending on where your critical sites are and suppliers that are maybe already there in the ground with fiber, you may want to award it on a geographic basis. So that concludes the presentation on the 3 use cases. Now we can open it up for any other questions, concerns, or discussion.
When does, what's the anticipation date for having pricing past this next fiscal year loaded into the price portal?
So there's the unit pricer only shows current year pricing, and then on October 1st of this year, you will start to see next year's prices. But the EIS agency pricer already has all 5 years loaded. You just need to get an account and fill out the proper forms, non-disclosures, et cetera, to get access.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So the answer is now. It's available through the agency pricer now.
Yeah, I'll have to open up a ticket. It doesn't, my security here blocks that. It doesn't let me load the page. So, but I'll fix it. Thanks.
Any other questions, items?
And of course, you can always reach out to your agency manager, who can always answer, if you don't see an answer to something or you're having troubles building it, you can always reach out to your agency manager. And that's actually a link. I think we have the information on one of our slides. We do have that. It's on the customer support page within our site.
Any other questions?
Yeah, on this slide, you see some links to the EIS contract for some of these specific topics such as access diversity, special construction, and task order projects, etc.
And now that I'm looking at it, I don't know that we have it. Yeah, we don't have it listed as a reference, but we'll make sure that we edit the document to ensure you have it.
Okay.
So, we always try, this is again Cindy Stowe, we always try to allot 90 minutes, in case we have a lot of discussion or questions or whatever. We're going to continue to try to build out additional sessions. I urge all of you that if you have not attended our other sessions, we do have them on GSA YouTube, where the recordings are there. We also have other locations. If you go to our training page, it will point you to all the various training that we had. Again, we want to thank everybody. Roger, thank you very much. Jim and Bill for your time today to present the topic. But when we send the survey out, we really highly encourage any feedback on future sessions you may need. If you run into problems in finding any sessions that we may have had over the course of last summer and this fall, again, you have a good relationship with your account manager. They'll be glad to find it. If they can't find it, they'll find me, and I'll find it for you. But again, we'll ask one more time if anybody has anything they'd like to say or any questions And if you do have questions regarding the topic, you can always email the TCC address that was provided on your registration notification. And we'll make sure that that's also included in the presentation. Help that.
When are these slides going to be available?
They're available now. If you wanted to, you could download it. You see on the far right, it says files.
It's grayed out. It's grayed out. The download files button is grayed out.
Oh, is it?
Got to click on it.
Yep.
On the file.
If you click on the file.
Thank you for that instruction.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to make sure we have some questions. So, but they'll be mailed out also. They'll be emailed right after the session closes today. Does that help?
Oh, it's downloading now. Thank you for the instruction. I appreciate it.
Sure, and the only thing you don't have is the link to the agency manager to find them, but if you go to gsa.gov...
Paul is his agency manager.
Oh, is that Paul? Oh, okay.
This is Paul Ahern at the ROB.
Yes. Are there any other questions, comments?
Cindy, that use case that's at the very bottom of the page about accommodating executive moves, adds, and changes, is that on the EIS transition page, or is that on the Interact site?
That is a use case that it's another of the 6 that we spoke of earlier. We talked about 3 here today. So for that one, when we get the final approvals to publish FUG version 3, it'll be available to you then.
Okay, thanks. I think that one will be very helpful.
Was that the one we just had? Tim Horan did?
Right.
Yeah, so that's available on...
Just ask that question. Carolyn?
Yes.
What we'll do is we'll make sure that we get that presentation to you so you can see it.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It was recorded, but I'll get her the link that she can either listen to it or access the document.
I'd like to request that as well. What's the best way to do that? Email this invite?
We can send that link out.
We'll send that link out. Yep.
Okay, great.
We'll make sure everybody gets it.
Now their agency manager can supply the use case for them now.
Should be. Tell them where the link is. The link is off the EIS transition website? So if you go to the EIS transition, I don't know if you can get to it, the transition website, you'll see the resources, and you should be able to find it right there.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll also get it out to you.